Welcome to Alien Theorist Theorizing. We got another special interview episode today. I'm Braden.
I'm Zell.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Andrew.
And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Jason Martell. Some of you might recognize him from, the well-known series Ancient Aliens, which is right up our alley. But he's also a well-known researcher, author in the fields of ancient civilizations, extraterrestrial life, and advanced technologies. It's just all over the place. Just absolutely jack of all trades. I believe you have over 20 years now studying and investigating the vast amount of mysteries that suffuse our world, and also exploring the possibilities of extraterrestrial life, either here on Earth and now or in the past. And also, you've appeared again, Ancient Aliens, a number of other TV shows that you've been in, and you've also published several books. I believe Knowledge Apocalypse is one.
Yes.
And with a number of topics, like covering just about all of the coolest stuff that have to do with the connections of either, ancient astronaut theory and, the connection with extraterrestrials, perhaps visiting Earth sometime in the past. I think I nailed it all.
Just all around badass legend. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you for such an eloquent introduction, hitting all the points there. It's my pleasure to be on and have a fun conversation tonight with the gentlemen.
We didn't use AI to come up with any of that, by the way.
That's right. Well, we can make sure we throw that into the pot tonight as well and mix that up. One of the ingredients.
Awesome, Jason. So to get the conversation started, I mean, what led you down the path to delve into these ancient mysteries of ancient civilizations, and pretty much how did you get started down this field? Because it's not a common field. They don't teach it in high school.
They don't. I appreciate the question. It's interesting. I'm 49 now, and looking back, time flies. When I was in college in my early 20s, first of all, there was a different climate for those, these type of topics: ufology, paranormal, ancient astronaut theory. If you said ancient astronaut theory, someone would be like, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
So 20 years ago, these topics were not as prevalent as they were today. A little bit harder to broach the conversation with my peers. So when I was in college just as a layman college student studying science and technology, waiting tables, surfing when I had time, living in San Diego, someone had mentioned to me that, there's this company that has actually imaged on the surface of Mars pyramids and what looks like a huge human face, but they're just not talking about it publicly. And I was like, how could this be? What are you talking about? This sounds like it would be the greatest discovery. And it turns out that, in doing my homework, the company being referenced was called Malin Space Science Systems, which was also located in San Diego, where I was attending college. Interesting thing is, Malin Space Science Systems is in charge of basically arming all the orbiters and landers for the most part of the last 20 years for the satellites and landers we send to Mars. They're using a Malin Space Science System camera. And so all these shots of the face from the Mars Global Surveyor and a few other missions, I just contacted Dr. Mike Malin as a college student and asked him, are these structures possibly artificial? And he said, no, they're all natural weather erosions created by natural processes. No aliens or humans were involved. And that just kind of made my, my eyebrows raise even more in curiosity. I was able to find several peer-reviewed scientists, one of them named Dr. Mark Carlotto, who developed mathematical algorithms for satellite telemetry to detect artificial objects. Meaning, if we're taking pictures of Russia, he could run his fractal analysis and say, oh, look, those are tanks and troops covered by tarps or shrubbery. So his fractal analysis could identify artificiality. We ran his fractal analysis over the Cydonia region with the face and pyramids. You get a 98% hit that these are artificial structures.
Oh, cool.
So NASA just never went to any great lengths to verify any of the data that's in their archives about the face or the pyramids. And so I think and I can go into more detail, but that's what really sparked my curiosity and going, well, wait a minute. These are structures on another planet that we can't even figure out, let alone the ones all over our own planet that lead us back into our true origins. And so I think that's what really started to spark my curiosity.
Now, do you think possibly that they have done that research and are just hiding it?
Most definitely. The answer I just presented at this year's Alien Con was that there's a track record of obfuscation around the real data publicly, and without their meaning to do it. Meaning, we've had a track record of NASA since they started releasing photographs of the moon, like smudging stuff out, copying and pasting it, doing bad Photoshop edits before we had Photoshop.
Right. We
can run AI analysis now on that old data set and say, wow, look at all these human-made changes and identify them very easily. And some of them are like, you're covering stuff up. So there's always been
what you're saying is NASA is really the first catfish.
In a sense,
right?
they're
catfishing us.
Yeah. Or even, I would say they're making it look like there's nothing there at all to look at. It's like a reverse catfish. What they're doing is basically obfuscating the data.
Fish cat.
Yes, it's a fish cat. And so now that all the latest imagery of the face, they've imaged it over the last 20 years repetitively, and each time it's just getting worse. So it's basically the same track record that they're doing with ufology in general, is obfuscation of the real data and saying, we're going to give you some answers, we're going to look into it, and no, they never do. So that's the current status of that.
Never a straight answer, as they call them.
That's right. NASA, never a straight answer. But we're hoping to send missions like SpaceX and others that are publicly funded for the most part, and with more direct access, people foot to Mars. We're going to get some real answers, I think, within our lifetime, which will be interesting.
Oh, that's super cool. We can't wait.
So just like, do you think, so if we went to Mars and we find these artificial structures, like say a pyramid structure, would you instantly link that this is obviously maybe some sort of civilization that has come through, made these structures on Mars, made these same structures on Earth? Like, is there, at that point, would you say a direct connection between the two planets?
I'd say there's definitely a Mars-Earth connection at the root of the question, but there's a deeper solution to figuring out the problem. When I started to look at all the other ancient cultures here on Earth, I really started focusing on ancient Iraq, which is known as Sumer, Mesopotamia, Babylon. And the interesting connection there is seeing that across those cultures, I'm sorry, I've got some children in the background.
Hey,
I apologize.
Hey, we got them too.
We got them too.
We got them all.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Ours are just tied up upstairs.
Yeah, we lock them upstairs. We lock them outside. Yeah.
They'll settle down. There's pyramids of knowledge across cultures that we can't explain how they have this knowledge. And it leads to a bigger question to say, all the ancient cultures, the top 30 that we know of across the world, we're all influenced by some lost technological civilization that was here before the Great Flood. We don't know exactly who they were, but unraveling them and understanding their place in our chain of events in the historical record that's lost right now off our history books, they're most likely the best candidates. We can refer to them in Ancient Aliens terms as the Anunnaki, or the Nephilim, or these giants that once walked upon the earth. There's different labels. We really don't know, but there's a strong connection to show that some lost great race that was technologically advanced, influencing all cultures, probably was doing stuff on other parts of the solar system in companion to Earth's presence as well.
See, that makes a ton of sense to me, because like you look at the Babylonians who had the star catalogs, and the Sumerians who were responsible for hundreds of firsts in technology. And they have this advanced understanding of astronomy and math. And it's like, what exactly was it about that area, right? Like, was the Euphrates and the Tigris spiked with Adderall? Or like, where are they getting all this fucking information from, right?
It's also interesting is the further back you go, You look into the times of the records of, even when it hits the New King James Version in English, and the story of Noah, look at the lifespan of Noah. It's over 900 years. When you go back further into the Sumerian and Akkadian versions, the Sumerian kings list shows the lifespan, some of these kings and their ruling times of being thousands of years. You have to wonder if this isn't mythology. And I'll give you another example. We don't understand currently what heaven means or all those things in our mythology, but one of those in the Sumerian, lexicon of information is Nibiru is another planet where these gods, the Anunnaki, supposedly come from. And this planet is on a 3,600-year orbit around the sun. So if you figure one solar year for us is 365 days, that's how long it takes for our planet to go around the sun, 365 days. One solar orbit on Nibiru is 3,600 of our years. Hypothetically, let's say Jesus Christ was an Anunnaki or came from Nibiru. Now, I'm speaking hypothetically. I don't know that, but looking at the timelines, he's here, he leaves, and 3,600 years pass on Earth. While he's been on Nibiru, it's been 1 year for him. Just 1 year. He comes back on Earth, it's been 3,600 years. The whole idea of just going to another planet and having a longevity of lifespan or working between the two planets, there's just a whole other, wealth of information. If we can dive deeper as we learn more about these ancient gods and the extraction of information that man at the time was taking from them, we're now starting to decode a lot of this lost science and knowledge, and we're still trying to catch up. Basically, is the answer.
Right, because
I always find that the most fascinating thing that, with people who are staunch believers in religion will almost scoff and gasp at the us be like, maybe he was an alien. Maybe that's how he did all these amazing feats that no one else has ever done. And they're like, what? Like absurd. And you're like, well, no one else is turning water to wine, parting the seas. Like, no one else is doing these feats. So it's like, why is it so hard for, that, make that connection for people who believe in Jesus that, perhaps he wasn't from here.
Given the time of year, right? Easter's coming. Obviously, Jesus, Anunnaki, came to Earth to hide the eggs. Makes perfect sense.
No, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, he wasn't from this world. I mean, that's right. He's not from here.
That's basically what the story tells us.
He's not from here. He was sent down for whatever reason. It was to cleanse sins. I mean, stuff is lost in translation over different versions of biblical text, but in essence, he wasn't from here. He was an alien. I talk to the people that knock on my door all the time. I tell them the same thing. And they go, what? And I go, he wasn't from here. He was an alien. And then they leave and come back.
Zell pulls a reverse Uno card on them when they knock on his door.
When you mention the word like Jesus, right, it's a very esoteric conversation. And I would say that, being open-minded to the topic, one, is a prerequisite. It's not meant to say anything one side or the other. To balance the conversation, I would throw out, there's a great movie that people should watch called Zeitgeist.
Well, hold up. Quick message from the Anunnaki. We'll be right back.
Yeah.
Zeitgeist gives you a whole new perspective on the whole role of a Jesus character being played out by many other figures throughout time and having the same set of events at the birth of the time of the three stars aligning and everything, almost to show that Jesus's birth could also be described as literally just an astronomical event. So whether he existed, who he was, what his role was here on earth, there are many questions. But I think it's important. One thing I learned being raised as a Christian and then stepping outside of that circle and having a respect for all religions is they all teach pretty much the same principles about how to behave as a human being.
Just do no harm.
You have all the things that make sense. Right. So, but there is a higher learning injected into the basis of all these religions. And again, if you go back to not the King James English version, roll it back to the Hebrew Old Testament, roll it back to the Akkadian, Sumerian. You find these versions of, just like in English, we have the 7 days of creation. Well, in Sumerian, there are 7 tablets of creation, part of a much longer story. And many of these descriptions in the Atrahasis and the Epic of Gilgamesh, they give us a lot more detail about the creation story and include other characters, some of them being, for instance, like this planet Nibiru, and how it possibly shaped our solar system in its very earliest form. And so a lot of that information, again, when you look at it from end to end, explaining some of the even parts of how our Earth came to be, it gets into an interesting story. I'll touch into one of those since I mentioned Nibiru and creation tales.
Sure.
Right now, if you look at our Earth's history going back 4.7 billion years, rolling back the clock, when everything was just coalescing, it became one giant supercontinent called Pangaea. So it's basically one landmass all connected, and then everything else is water. Now, over time, again, lots of time, the land masses have moved apart like a skin of an apple, just kind of popping off. And you can see that today, if you were to move all the pieces back together, you're like, oh, wow, Pangaea, it fits. What's interesting is that rolling back the clock, in the story of creation from the Sumerian point of view, Nibiru, its main moon, comes in and whacks our primitive Earth and literally hits it in such a forceful manner, it strews out a debris field, which the Bible literally calls the hammered out bracelet, the asteroid belt. And so when we look at that story and see that, Earth being whacked by another moon and making it just one chunk landmass and all the water kind of coalesces around it, it literally fits the creation story of Pangaea. Visualizing, you can see that it's just one landmass, the water all fits around it, and it kind of moves into shape. So from the very beginning of the tale, there's linkage there with our own knowledge and science that holds up from some of these creation myths, especially the Sumerian ones, where we're not trying to change the Bible in any way. We're basically upholding the biblical veracity by showing just how deep these connections go.
Right, and that's cool that you mentioned like a planet hitting Earth or a moon hitting Earth, because now they actually do like take like biblical history away. They call it Thea, which was a planet pretty much that hit Earth and it caused the scar of the Pacific Ocean. Like they know they can, and that's like. But then they say you're saying asteroid belt, but they say that's ended up being our moon. But maybe it could have been a combination of both. Like some chunks formed our moon that it's in such close orbit to Earth that doesn't seem possible. A lot of people think, and then maybe the fragments spun off and did form an asteroid belt. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of theories recently, right, over the last 10 years to explain, oh, wow, yeah, something came in and whacked Earth. The debris field coalesced to make our moon, something of that nature. It starts to get a little bit more in alignment with the Sumerian versions.
Now, besides like geological and astronomical processes that are, perhaps outlined in the Bible, I mean, you have things like, some of the more well-known relics and, perhaps like ancient technologies that could have been left behind or somewhere. I mean, you have things like, perhaps the existence of things like the Ark of the Covenant or Philosopher's Stone or like some kind of, an Excalibur is something that are perhaps ancient technologies. So in your experience, in your studies, what do you think is probably, I don't know, maybe your top or your top, I could say top 3 if you can't think of just one, like possibilities of like, of one of these is like an actual we could find and interact with, like.
Well, I definitely got a doozy of an answer for you there, but I want to give you a 2-part question. So remind me of Ark of the Covenant if I literally spin off on a tangent on this first one and forget. Okay, so 2 parts. One, and when you mention geological and astronomical data, just want to touch on the fact that for even non-scientific people, you don't have a degree, you would like to find evidence in this field and show I found some type of connection. anyone can do this research using two tools. One, geological evidence, and then two is astronomical evidence. So if we look at Egypt as an example, geologically, there's a discrepancy between the date they're given to say that the pyramids were built by the Egyptians since 2500 BC. Geologically, we can look at the surrounding terrain of the Sphinx, the inner enclosure of the walls, and see that it's massive water weathering has taken place. That means that water must have been flowing heavily over the surface for a long period of time. They can't explain that other than to say that, well, the last time there was water like this on Egypt would have been like the pre-deluge, 10,000 years plus. So there's great geological evidence, one, of water erosion to say, wow, these structures might be much older. Two, if you just look on Google Earth and realize that the pyramids and the Nile used to be right next to each other, right? The Pharaoh would walk down, get on his boat, cruise the Nile. I'm awesome. Now, if you look on Google Earth, you'll see that the Nile has meandered many miles away from the pyramids. That's a geological change that, again, you can track in differentiation. Two is astronomically. The pyramids are aligned to the Orion constellation. They're literally a terrestrial map of the Orion constellation. But from the year 10,500 BC, you can use Redshift or any other star charting software, and it'll tell you what stars are going to be above you tonight, tomorrow night, or 10,000 years ago. And it turns out that Egypt was built where Orion at 10,500 BC is reflected by the three pyramids, three in a line, one slightly offset. And the Sphinx is directly staring east into the constellation of Leo. So astronomical evidence is pretty strong there for a 10,500 date. Geological evidence shows much more of a 10,000, to 13,000 range. Other areas like Cusco in Peru, you can see that Lake Titicaca has receded, and sites like Machu Picchu and others were right on the edge of a shoreline that doesn't exist much like it did now, right? So I would say that, one, you can look at a lot of the geological and astronomical evidence for some of these sites, find alignments to dates, and look at the evidence that way to compile a much more interesting case. Two, sorry for the long-winded answer.
That's great.
Well, here's your juicy answer. One of the most esoteric things that I've seen is the topic of the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Exodus of Moses is intertwined with another character whose name is Akhenaten, and he was one of the first pharaohs.
Alien hybrid pharaoh.
Alien king, yeah.
That's right. Now, there's strong evidence to show that what he was also using as what we know as the Ark of the Covenant was essentially some type of a power source for the Great Pyramid. The Ark of the Covenant fits at a biblical cubit length, literally right into the box that's sitting there today that they're like, oh, this is the leftover chamber for a tomb. It's not. It actually is lined with crystallized, perfectly sealed in a way to generate an electrical charge and keep it resonating. So my theory, which I'm still looking into, and others, is that the Ark of the Covenant was being used to power the Great Pyramid at a large scale. And what happened was when Akhenaten left with his people, he also took the Ark of the Covenant. And of course, if you take the battery out of the city and the lights turn out, Ramses comes after him, not just for his people, but to get the Ark of the Covenant back. So there's a much more interesting, intricate tale there about the Exodus being tied to the Ark of the Covenant, not just holding some tablets, but being a large ancient power source.
Some type of capacitor for the Great Pyramid to project some type of low current energy.
Like when you read,
exactly.
Like there are tons of references of the Ark itself killing people, shooting lightning bolts. Like anybody who's tried to, that's fucking crazy. That adds up.
If you've seen Indiana Jones, that movie,
Melting Faces,
scared the hell out of me. And there is, significant evidence to suggest that the Ark of the Covenant is a real object. I did an on-camera experiment for Ancient Aliens here at the University of Irvine with the lab physics professor, Dr. Denon Clark. He's a good friend of mine. And we created a life-size Ark of the Covenant and ran current through it. and showed that it's basically a grounded capacitor. So, meaning the people that had to carry the ark wore a special set of stones. It can only touch it in certain places. There was a very defined process for how you interacted with this object. And it made it sound exactly like it was some type of high energy capacitor.
Well, because
that's cool.
Well, I was just going to say, because they talk about, because a lot of the internet always says Tesla based his tower upon the construction of the Pyramid of Giza because it's built over an aquifer, and some type of that moving water over the type of stone created some type of vibrational energy, which could be projected through the top capstone and then maybe picked up by the obelisks, because no one really knows the purpose of these giant 100 plus, 200 plus ton obelisks seemingly all over Egypt. Some type of ionosphere energy transmission. And then they do have some hieroglyphs even show some type of batteries or light bulbs. So they almost
the Dendera light bulb.
They almost knew of the process of electricity that could create light. So
you had the Baghdad battery and the Dendera light bulb.
And Baghdad battery has been proven that it can hold one Baghdad battery is like a AA battery. So it can power a light bulb. It's crazy.
Two topics. You guys are giving me great segue. I feel bad too. And maybe I could do this since you said you're going to edit this.
Maybe.
I have a Baghdad battery upstairs, and I was going to bring it and show it to you on camera.
Oh yeah, you got it.
Just go get it.
100%. 100%.
We'll make that happen in a minute. But I wanted to give you two answers, and we can come back to that. When we talk about more of the evidence at a granular level, and not just the Ark of the Covenant, right? There's micro as well as macro evidence of ancient technology, and in Dendera, Egypt, there are wall reliefs of what clearly are depicted as light bulbs plugged into some type of energy source. Now, modern Egyptologists tell you that what you're seeing there is the lotus flower, and what you're seeing coming out there is simply the aroma of the lotus flower. It looks like a filament.
It does.
Now I did an on-camera test where I had one of those created using the same type of light methane gas that could come out naturally from a swamp, and just giving it a slight electrical charge, it illuminates. Wow. And I do have a Baghdad battery, and I'm able to use grape juice, wine, vinegar, orange juice. And with that, I can create a consistency of 4 volts registered with a voltmeter. So if you figure, a modern flashlight can be powered by a 9-volt battery, they definitely had the capacity to use electricity. And if you look at a lot of these deep recesses of crypts, in underground dwellings, there's no evidence of soot where all these hieroglyphs and colors are carved. No flame, no evidence of flame being lit there for hours and burning the wall. The only other thing they say is they were using copper mirrors to reflect the light.
Aziz, light.
Yeah, that's what I thought, dude. Just a bunch of slaves with mirrors.
Yeah, it's very simple, Now, I will touch on, too, when you talk about a subtle energy, where I theorize, and this might, go into the last part of our conversation with more depth here, but one of the theories I've been studying is called the lost cycle of time. And many ancient cultures tracked what we now call precession, which is a 24,000-year cycle. 12,000 years of going into a golden age, 12,000 years of descension into a dark age. And it repeats. Somehow, when we were in the golden ages, as we're starting to creep back into the dark ages, they built, in theory, still don't know, some type of geodetically placed connected set of sites that when flipped on, take that natural energy that happens during the golden age and keep it alive as long as you can. Now, we've tied it to a process that might be related to our sun. One of the best theories now is that we're most likely not a single sun solar system. No, it's very likely that we have 2 suns. All the other solar systems that we've been filming most likely are binary, most of them even sometimes more than 2 suns. And so the whole model of our solar system's motion, if you think about it, it changes if we're a binary system. And I'll spell it out. Meaning, if you think about a solar system model right now, you see the sun and our little planet spinning around our sun. If our sun is in orbit around another sun, that means that all of us, all of our other planets, we're going along for a ride through space, three-dimensionally, moving through space while the sun is orbiting another sun. So from that perspective, there's a good chance to reason that when our suns are at their farthest points in their orbit, we're in the dark ages. When our suns are at their closest point in the orbits, we're in the golden age. Something happens about sunlight. Now, if you think about summertime, and I'm going to go deep into a couple examples, you guys are going to be like, wow, what the hell? But summertime, plants wake up, everyone gets energy, and you want to go outside, and you feel alive, and it's just awesome. Something about the energy of two suns, maybe a bluish tint rather than yellow, does something at an evolutionary process where we just enhance. And I don't understand what it is, but that's the part I'm trying to unlock. And there's just a great amount of evidence to show that we're going through this cycle, and we're just now coming out of the dark ages again and unlocking this lost knowledge. And I'll give you the last piece before I'll shut up. The ancients knew about 3 cycles. The first 2 we get, but the third one we're like, wow. Cycle number 1 is we're spinning on our axis, right? And because of that change, every 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night, you don't realize it, but when it gets dark out, like it's about to happen in about an hour, your subconscious says, oh, time to go to sleep, and you're out. And that is because of a solar motion. The planet's spinning, you go to sleep during that second phase. Cycle number 2, the planet is orbiting around the sun. And because of that, we can see physical changes that take place on the planet. Temperature variations, plants and animals moving around, migrating, temperature differences, all because of the orbit. Now they say there's a third effect, which is precession. And it's basically this 24,000 year cycle, which causes a rise and fall of civilization. We don't quite understand it because it's 24,000 years,
right? And
we only live 100 years, right? It's much harder for us to understand the frame of reference, but there's a much bigger picture there, and unlocking how precession was viewed as the 12 constellations we have now. It's like a grand celestial clock, and every 2,000 years we point to a new North Star. We just moved out of the age of Pisces
to Aquarius.
Right around 2012 into the age of Aquarius. The Mayan calendar wasn't over. It's resetting into a new age.
I could start blasting that song again.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a way better song for this age.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm waiting for it.
Well, that's kind of an interesting thought too, because I'm still under the impression that we don't truly know why we sleep. Like we have some pretty good ideas, like, well, conserve some energy through the night, but like we don't actually like
recovery.
Yeah,
that's the main thing.
We absolutely don't.
Other than that, it's like you can get that from.
It's very essential.
Yeah, but you can get that from rest.
From going crazy. Like,
yeah, sure.
Also, like,
no.
Well, I have very vivid dreams, and so I even wonder sometimes if our consciousness doesn't play another role when we're not sleeping, if it's like being occupied by some other part of our presence that we just don't understand. So who knows?
That's a really good point, because I'm thinking about that. It's like some of the studies are kind of put forth a theory that it's perhaps like one of the ideas is when we sleep, that's the time for our brains to kind of organize a lot of the information that we've accumulated over the day, over the course of the day. Our brains need time. I mean, it's like a computer. You gather a bunch of data, but it needs time to process it. And why? Like, how does it process this information, and what does it prioritize, and what does it deprioritize, and what goes into what? I mean, that's still pretty much a mystery about where some of that stuff goes. So like you said, it's like, is it, are we drawing it into something? Is it being forgotten, or is it being, broadcasted somewhere? Is it being stored somewhere off-site in a cloud? Like, it's something like that, perhaps.
It's funny you say cloud, because my question is going to say that I hope maybe within our lifetime technology, I don't think it's going to solve it, but maybe technology will allow us a bridge into paranormal or into the afterlife. If we think about it as a vibrational frequency, a third dimensional vibration and how we work, maybe there's something there that they're able to tune in to other channels. You know, if you think about a radio station, if you're at one station and it's playing rock and roll and you to some classical, there's kind of this phasing out from one signal until the other one comes in. And it's almost like sometimes paranormal experiences are like that. It's like the creature, the object, or whatever isn't quite phased, tuned all the way in. And there's these interactions where we can't quite understand. But if we're able to perhaps tune that to a frequency or somehow create a technology layer that allows us to understand it better, paranormal investigating will become a lot more interesting.
Man, I'm glad you said that, because we operate and we perceive the universe through visible light. As humans, we have instruments you can see in the infrared and ultraviolet, etc. But visible light's only like a fraction of a percent of what's actually out there, what's actually being emanated from through the galaxy. So if we could develop tech, as you said, to be able to, maybe that's all it is like these people are operating on different frequencies, these extraterrestrials, these other civilizations, or whatever it is. If we just can develop the tech to see, because we can see infrared and ultraviolet, but we can't see everything all the time. If we can just hone that technology, and there's some type of light being or something that can manifest from a different frequency into our own. I mean, that's an endless thought that I have all the time. Like, well, we're here. We operate here. I mean, what about the 99.9% other frequencies?
Yeah. Or even making the tech like just more practical. Like we have detectors that can pretty much detect gravity. Like that was a couple of years ago when they used the laser measurement.
When the black holes collided, and they could
when the black holes collided, and we literally detected gravity waves, like for one of the first times ever. And it's like, you know, we have some of the technology that, you know, that paranormal researchers use. You have your EMFs and your radio frequency scanners to some extent, and having those things. It's like just maybe that stuff that they're using is just not sensitive enough. Like it's not the stuff that, you know, the big universities and, you know, private research foundations use. Like those things take up like entire floors of buildings. And it's like, if at some time we can make that technology, you know, they shrink it down, whether it's, you know, a modification of, you know, the processors or whatever they can do. If they can shrink those processes into something that is portable and, you know, accessible to everybody. And like you said, like maybe it's just a matter of time till we're able to apply those and take those out and move them out. And we will find something that we just haven't had the right tools to detect what is going on and follow those lines of inquiry into the esoteric and the paranormal.
Yeah, there's two things out there. There's one, if you Google Kodak ghost film, there was in the 80s a certain type of Kodak film that picked up paranormal stuff easier. And this one guy literally was having conversations where the ghost would write in the special frequency that could be seen on the film. And they were having full-on conversations for like over a year. Weird stuff. But this certain Kodak photography film, there might be things like that where we're just not using the right tools, but also just from a more like down-to-earth perspective, you know, using terms like Chat GPT and AI. It's very possible that within the next few years, I know I'm working on it as a side project, is creating machine learning around our specific areas of knowledge and applying them in ways where at a high level, there's still gaps in the overall knowledge base. I'll give you an example. If you go to Chat GPT 4 now and ask it, what's ancient aliens or what's the ancient astronaut theory? It's going to be like, oh, it's this pseudoscience thing that some people are looking into and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
It hasn't been learned or taught from data sets of saying like, go watch 19 seasons of Ancient Aliens and then let me ask you a question. It hasn't been trained on that data. So one, there's going to be a whole bunch of new information that we need to feed to our overall learning of these mechanisms as people are tripping out on them. They're missing a lot of the nuances of like real knowledge. But two, we can use these tools now to do some very creative stuff. When we talk about machine learning, let's say you create a data set of all the known UFO types, cylindrical, spherical, triangular, whatever, and you load it into a machine learning and say, okay, I want you to scrub through like all known live stream webcam archives and look for any of these types of objects and flag if you find any of them. I'll give you an example. Like I use a service here in San Diego called Surfline. It allows me to look at all the beaches that I want to go surfing at, and it live streams it 24 hours a day and keeps in the archives 3 days back. I could take all that footage and scrub it to say, look for anything in any of these files over the last 3 days of 24 hours across these 6 beaches facing from San Diego westward. Do you see anything? Model 2, look for any of these types of things and scrub NASA's archive of the surface of Mars for pyramids, faces, whatever else that I'd want to teach it to go look for, instead of like I had to do manually for the last 20 years of looking.
Scrolling through. Yeah.
The machine learning and AI could be like, oh yeah, look, I found these 17 hits, right? So there's a much more utilitarian explosion of tools that I think are coming, especially around ufology, that'll just speed up the process of what we would want to do and kind of get more people involved to, create a large data set. So that's exciting.
Yeah, no doubt. That's super cool.
Yeah, making any types of, some of the biggest things are when technology that is, AI has kind of been a little bit of the realm of, sci-fi, of course, like for the last, decades until now. You had like Deep Blue and you're like, okay, you can beat a couple chess guys. Like, not a couple, Gary Kasparov, whatever, grandmaster chess masters, but whatever, who cares? Like, what is that going to do for me? I never play chess. But you have something like this, like AI, which is like now becoming like a home tool, and it's becoming accessible to people, where it's like, yeah, ChatGPT does a ton of really neat things that, but a lot of like those neat things, you just have to know how to ask the right questions. And once you get those questions down and like you can get it to do things like, hey, I need you to explain this concept to me as if I were an 8th grader, and it's can take like quantum physics or something like that, or string theory, and kind of break it down into like these little easier, more digestible pieces. And all of that knowledge becomes more accessible, which is like, you could say the same thing about the Gutenberg press, or like when, we learned how to make paper and, record knowledge, and people learned how to read. And that's when these explosions of knowledge happen. And this just might be, we're on the precipice of that now, which is
it's all fun and games until it becomes Skynet. All right.
Yeah. Everyone always alludes to it having an intelligence. And I'm looking at it from more just the utilitarian aspect, not so much like an ethical, what's going to happen when we give it life. But there's still interesting crossovers there. I saw an article recently where I believe it was in Brazil, a drone was flying over a part of the Amazon where no one goes. And they filmed a tribe that's literally cut off from civilization. It doesn't interact in any way with civilization, completely kept to itself. And, it's seeing this drone filming them for the first time. And you wonder, like, what kind of an influence that's going to have on them. Now, we're interested in going, wow, what are they doing? But from their perspective, how is that going to change their, view of technology or of a flying machine? And it's the same thing that has played out across the globe from other cultures. It's something that it's got a name. It's called cargo cult. But it plays into the ancient astronaut theory to define how this has happened from ancient cultures. In World War I and in World War II and in more modern times, when we flew airplanes into these parts and a soldier gets out for the first time and interacts with the tribesmen, he lights up a cigarette and they're like, wow, what is he doing? Holds out a voice recorder and records their voice and plays it back, takes photographs of them. They don't understand any of this technology. Sometimes shipments would be dropped from a plane and it would land in the middle of the tribe, and instead of the camp, the tribes people crack it open and it's like, guns and food. They're like, oh, what is this awesomeness coming from the sky? They didn't understand the soldiers or the planes they flew in. And so when the soldiers packed up and left, an interesting phenomenon happened. You see them scraping away runways, making models of the airplane that looked just like an airplane. And they would sit there for hours staring at the sky, hoping to entice these things to come back and land, right? They didn't understand the technology, but they clearly had interacted with something that affected them. And if you look back in history, you can see all these ancient cultures that said they came down from the skies. Now, we don't understand the technology, so we maybe put them in a chariot or give it some natural understanding. But there's all these descriptions of them receiving information or interacting with these people who had the power of flight without not possibly understanding how that technology worked.
They see something and they document it in their own version,
correct.
depending on the culture.
Well, and I always think of that as like just an like extrapolation on how things could be. Like if we think we're the top end, we're like, oh, people are like, oh, this is it. Us humans, we're it. I go, well, like the evidence for me that there's extraterrestrial life that would come and visit, not say anything, do a flyby, peek in, leave. Like we do that to other humans. They have no idea. We could make their lives exponentially better in an hour. And we're like, no. Do not contact them. It's their way of life, right? And we do that to other humans. So it's like to say that now, like we're the top of the food chain. I'm like, are we 100% sure on that? Or could there even be more advanced humans that just look at our planet and go like, hey, they're doing their thing. Leave them be.
They roll up their windows as they drive by.
Yeah, it's just like just extrapolate that, right?
No, you're right. I mean, whatever higher intelligence is interacting with our planet, they've shown a great deal of restraint in how they've interacted with us. All the evidence of them, and I say them broadly, of UFO activity, going over military silos, nuclear silos, independently turning missile silos off, doing crazy things in our airspace. There's no answer for that. And if they wanted to do something to harm us, there's nothing stopping them. But they've been very, just kind of pushing us slightly to make decisions on our own in a better way, and hopefully join this galactic community that's going on. But there's clearly, something happening where over the last 50 years, the way this information is being presented to us is spoon-fed in a very systematic way that, again, is obfuscated from the true information. And I'll show just a few words. Project Blue Book, Project Grudge, the Condon Report, ATIP. No offense to any of my friends on that thing, but all of these task force have done nothing to reveal new knowledge to the public, while in the background, there's clear evidence to show that for a long time, they've been reverse engineering and doing stuff, that they have the knowledge, and it's not even perhaps the military or the government, it's private corporations that somehow have their hand in this mix, which I can't explain either. But it is an interesting look at where we are today.
Goddamn Blink 182 has their hands on stuff allegedly, right? So it's like Blink 182's yeah. So it's like,
well,
yeah.
You got
enough money, you can buy these things.
The game has changed. That's all. When we first started looking into these topics 20 years ago, only the military were funding and researching projects that had to do with alien tech. Whereas today in 2023, I, with my own technical skills, can go work for companies that are reverse engineering technology and get clearances and work on these as like my day job. Mm-hmm. That's a game changer as to why that's happening, other than it's just a systematic release and closer tightening in of this, as part of our society. It's just not going to happen overnight. It's like happening gradually.
So what are your thoughts on the recent, we've had the last year pretty exciting in the UFO world with the military come out with the Tic Tac and the gimbal, and now the Baghdad UFO, the Baghdad Phantom, the congressional hearings. What are your thoughts on these releases? Where do you think that's going?
Right. So just everything with even like ATIP and now taking UFO and making it UAP, it's just more obfuscation and confusion to not really hone in on what's really going on. I think, again, it's an interesting change. I'd answer it this way. The last time technology from the U.S. military was brought forth was stealth technology of the F-117 and the B-2. And so these things that we've been hearing about in the background, I think they've been trying to find a way to bring it to the public surface. And so the tidbits we see now of some of these foreign adversarial swarm drone, anti-gravitic, supersonic, a bunch of stuff, not alien, clearly next level tech is being shown because there's another egg to crack, in my opinion, which is the roughly $12 trillion in missing black budget funds that have gone towards a secret naval fleet of spaceships, an extension of the Navy into space. And, I'm sure there's a reason why it's not general public knowledge, but I firmly believe that a secret space program exists and that slowly that topic will be breached, especially if we go to Mars and things like that. Gary McKinnon hacking into NASA,
right. Others
who have broken this topic. It's not me. I'm just regurgitating known facts that clearly show, there's a military presence in space, which most likely is an extension of the Navy.
That's insane because we've talked about that before. Secret space program. I mean, you obviously can't take everyone's word for it, but the fact that if we do have this tech, it makes sense that for 20 or 30 years, we didn't know about the Blackbird, right? Some super advanced spy craft or spy plane that we had no idea of. So in 20 years from now, we look back and be like, oh yeah, we did have some type of at least interplanetary space force that we didn't tell the public about. It doesn't seem like a stretch.
They haven't released anything since stealth generation tech. There is something coming, which will be transatmospheric vehicles that go into space. And also, just from a standpoint of looking from a higher viewpoint, we put a man on the moon in 1969 and stopped. That's like Intel building the Pentium and saying, we built the Pentium chip. It's got 100 megahertz. We've done it. We're going to stop. We're done.
The pinnacle.
Now it's like, the Pentium 4.4 gigahertz quad processor. I mean, the point is they never stopped going to the moon and to Mars. They've never stopped. It's just not public knowledge. At some point, they're going to have to merge back into some type of public awareness if we are a spacefaring race and we start to go to the moon and to Mars through SpaceX and other companies.
Yeah, it's a cool time. It's a cool time.
Well, it does feel like we're really quickly ramping up here to another space race, especially with China announcing their plans to go back to the moon.
Artemis mission.
So maybe that's what we're about to see is this, and I'm all for it. Bring it on. Let's see it. Let's get another race going. Like I would love to see that and push the boundaries of what we know.
Yeah, and the only thing that I fear last few minutes here is that, a lot of these topics that come around ufology for what ifs, we have seen certain scenarios play out in the past that are trying to steer towards, let's call it like a one world government. And not to say I support that in any way, but there have been events in the past that question if something gnarly next were to happen at a global level. I would say that if you see all of a sudden when you wake up one day, UFOs all over the news, or that there's some type of invasion being announced, or you can see them in the skies, I would give caution to say that this is also probably planned and not just a spontaneous event. The next big shakedown thing would be the threat of an alien invasion. They've already used the threat of terrorists and other things like that.
It does seem like they're kind of prepping that because with the mothership.
Cut you off would be aliens. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, they said they just recently were in the UFO briefing talking about a mothership potentially could be in our solar system. I was like, well, that's a weird thing to announce.
Just kind of let that slip in there.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Could be.
Who knows? I wouldn't say it's not possible, but if something like that was announced, I would give great caution to say that it's probably a staged event of some of kind leading up towards this, disclosure type gradual release of this information.
Jason, just before we let you go, we're approaching the end of the time limit here. Where you're speaking at Contact in the Desert June 2nd and 4th, but other than that, where can people go to find more of your work?
Well, the best place is just to stay up to date is on jasonmartell.com. I will be appearing on April 10th in an episode of History's Greatest Mysteries, talking about pyramid power with Chris Dunn. So it's good that we touched on that. That was timely. And I'm also working on season 4 for The Proof is Out There, another series on the History Channel. So that's exciting. And maybe I'll be doing some more Ancient Aliens work. But definitely best place to catch me is just staying up to date with my website. I try to post relevant information there, and love all the new conferences that are happening once again post-COVID. Always looking for opportunities to meet people in person and collaborate further. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Awesome. Hey, Jason,
you guys have 2 seconds. If you guys have 2 seconds, as I promised, flip on the light, go grab that Baghdad battery.
Let's get the Baghdad battery. Yeah, we'll hold here. That's cool. He has a fucking real Baghdad battery.
That's badass.
I sort of feel like picked it up in like Iraq and like a 7-Eleven. Like they just got them all over the place.
Well, you got it like a pickle baby. Yeah. Hey, buddy, you want the Baghdad battery? Number one good price, huh?
You charge for
You got grape juice. You got the Pepsi. What do you want? Put it in.
Yeah, you yell at Saeed. He brings one out.
I just need a USB-C cable. USB-C cable. No, it's use Baghdad battery.
That's how we put your phone right on rock.
I've seen him before on the internet and pictures, but I've never actually seen one.
I remember seeing the Ancient Aliens episode. There's probably a couple other ones where they brought it out.
They always got the areas.
Well, let's see it.
This one's been wrapped up. So let me make sure it's here.
Someone stole it and put a fake in there. That's what.
No, I got all the pieces here. Let me just give you the little show and tell real quick. Pretty easy. All right, so basically what this is, here it is, Baghdad battery. So this is dope. A small clay pot, and then I have an iron rod wrapped around a copper lining with an asphalt stopper, right?
Yep.
Fill this with grape juice, wine, or vinegar. Place it into the inner part like this. Just get it to kind of fit all the way down in there. And eventually I could just use a voltmeter attached to these two surfaces, and it'll create positive electrons from grape juice, wine, vinegar, and you can generate about 4 volts.
So
that's so wild.
Is there different, did they find different like sizes of those that could create say 8 or 12 or like multiples of the volts, or is it just, you could just put them in series, those small ones?
There's all over Egypt, there's these large vase type structures that some of them are 6 feet.
Oh shit.
And so you imagine that, you could get a charge to do something much larger, something small also like that could be used next to a statue, so that when you went up to a church or something and you touched the statue, it would give you a static electricity shock. And you'd be like, the power of the gods,
Right.
So they used it for creative purposes, but I think clearly one of the other ones was as electricity, power source.
Yeah. Like a low volt light or something to be able to see in those passages of the pyramids and other.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, it's like how we use, robots and animatronics. I would think we could use them to build like robots that do work, but we have, animated replicas of presidents in Disney World.
That's awesome, man.
Well, hey, Jason, thank you so much for taking the time, coming on the show. We really appreciate it. To be honest, we've talked about it before on the show. You were one of our favorite people to meet in person at AlienCon. So I
appreciate that.
Definitely an approachable guy. Again, thanks for coming on the show. And as we always say at the end of these things, keep those eyes on the skies.
Excellent.